Good evening, Bahamas. This is NB12 broadcasting from Cable 12 Studios on Robinson Road. Here's what's making news tonight. We've got the results of the latest labor force survey.
Our studies showed that we had over 1,000 of those persons employed in Grand Bahama.
BEC Managers Union responds to the coming elimination of overtime, a large turnout for Therese Hepburn's memorial last night, plus Bahamian stakeholders attend a solar energy conference in Florida. Those stories and much more on the way. I'm Nakia DeVoe, and NB12 starts right now. Thanks again for joining us here at NB12. The country is showing a notable decline this year, according to the latest labor force survey, which was conducted during the final days of April. The survey, released by the Department of Statistics this afternoon, also showed a decline in the overall number of discouraged workers, those who have stopped looking for work. Paige McCartney has a breakdown and analysis of the figures.
The director of the Department of Statistics says those numbers are positive, but she said to keep in mind that the survey was taken right before the general election, and therefore that would have played a huge role in the final numbers. The survey is reflective of the labor force between April 23rd and 29th this year, just 1 week before the May 7th general election. It shows that the unemployment rate for the country decreased by 1.2% and now stands at 14.7%. The decline is reflective on both major cities. On New Providence, unemployment fell from 15.1% to 14%, and on Grand Bahama, the rate fell from 21.2% to 17.3%. This is even though more people joined the labor force, which now stands at 191,455 people. Compared to last year, just more than 3,100 people are employed, according to statistics. Supervisor of the Labor Force Survey, Cipriano Winters, said the former administration's 52-week jobs program and the general election were the main contributing factors to the increase.
We had the 52-week program, and so our studies showed that we had over 1,000 of those persons employed in Grand Bahama. So that accounted for some of the employed persons. And then it was around election time, and we know that the candidates probably hired some people or found employment elsewhere. But I think the fact that the 52-week came into existence accounted for some of the figures that we see in the employed section.
But while unemployment decreased on Grand Bahama, the percentage of discouraged workers on that island increased. Discouraged workers are those who are seeking work and are willing and able to work but are not. It increased on Grand Bahama by 12%. Director of the Department of Statistics, Kelsey Dorsett.
We can only assume that in Grand Bahama, the numbers discouraged would have increased because, well, maybe they saw some people out there getting jobs, all right, and they want, that kind of thing, and they might have just, withdrawn altogether at that point in time. Grand Bahama really is a kind of unique product, all right, because we saw that the unemployment declined, but we saw the discouraged increase, and it's difficult to say what exactly is happening there.
On New Providence, the number of discouraged workers actually decreased by 3%. Additionally, nationwide, more women are finding jobs than men. The percentage of female discouraged workers declined by 24%, but male discouraged workers increased by 28%. Women also make up the majority of those new to the workforce, growing by 3.6%.
If you look at the higher institutions, COB, Baptist, college, etc., more than 3/4 of the graduates are female. All right, so they, educationally wise, they are equipping themselves for employment far more so than the males. All right, COB is putting out far more female graduates than males.
Dorsett said the numbers show that male-dominated jobs like those in the construction field are leveling out. Dorsett said when all of these variables are taken into account, one can get a clearer picture of how healthy the country's economy really is. We'll have more on that in tomorrow's newscast. Reporting for NB12, I'm Paige McCartney.
President of BEC's managerial union, Irvin Dean, agrees with BEC Chairman Leslie Miller that $1 million per month in overtime pay for workers is excessive. Miller told our news team that he doesn't want to fight with the unions, but overtime will be cut dramatically within the next 6 months. Charisma Robinson reports.
Dean told NB12 today workers aren't to blame because BC already has a policy of rostering and flexi shifts in place, but he claims bosses there have just refused to implement it.
Management union and managers, we share the concern because we know that the institution, the organization, is having financial difficulties right now. As far as we're concerned, this union agreed to the concept of rostering. And the intent was to reduce or help the organization to reduce the overtime expenditure. Rostering simply is that the corporation could tell us that they need us to work whatever the start time is to the finish time within the same 8 hours. But in lieu of overtime, you get like $100 allowance per week, which means that you can only make up to $400 per month or $5,200 per year. Rostering was the solution as far as we're concerned. Rostering was agreed with the junior union, the BW, for the line staff. The problem is that the leadership of the organization did not meet a requirement to have it implemented. So here we are now years later, now they're complaining about the amount of overtime that is being paid.
Dean says few of the company's 1,000 workers qualify for excessive overtime, and Miller says it's only about 20 to 30 workers who carry home about $60,000 in overtime each year. Dean agrees with Miller that certain departments within BC may be in need of additional staff following years of hiring freezes.
One thing I did hear, or my understanding is that in the power stations, for instance, some of these people, the employers are required to work maybe around the clock to make sure that the machines don't break down throughout the night and this kind of stuff. So there is a chance that they may be required to work some significant amount of overtime, but I still believe that, you know, as managers, as leaders of the organization, we must find some way to do our best to reduce that. But again, the bulk of that, if any managers make it, is very little. It's not no significant amounts of money.
Union officials say, though, there is a downside to eliminating overtime.
Mainly the operations people earn the overtime or work the overtime hours, right? That cannot be eliminated totally because consumers wouldn't want the light to remain off for extended periods of time. So the operations people are required to restore power on overtime hours, and therefore some of the overtime is necessary.
Dean says the managers' union will raise the issue of rostering with Miller when they meet next week. Now, when it comes to the issue of electricity theft that was also highlighted by the BEC chairman, Dean says eliminating that will significantly help BEC. The corporation is putting a new department together that will specifically check meters, reorganize the collection process, and hunt down thieves.
As we disconnect people for non-payment, a lot of people are resorting to doing what they're doing. It's against the law. At this moment, I don't think we have enough staff to deal with it entirely, and I think the chairman plans to increase the staff in what we call revenue protection. Now, one thing we want to be clear of is that even though some people make this exorbitant amount of overtime, we don't want some wayward person or some criminal element to think that these people walking around with this kind of money in their pockets, and then they start targeting these people, because I think that's a concern that is within BEC now. The people make it. If they make it, it goes to the bank. They don't walk around with this money in their pocket.
Between $12 million annually in overtime and $500,000 per month in theft, BEC hopes to reduce its costs by up to $16 million. Reporting for NB12, I'm Charisma Robinson.
The Utilities Regulation and Competition Authority, or URCA, has gone on the defensive, saying in a statement yesterday that its new chairman, Randall Dorsett, previously represented Cable Bahamas Limited in legal matters, but that was prior to his appointment to head the regulatory agency's board. IRCA explained that Dorset, who is a partner in the law firm of Graham Thompson & Co., has represented Cable Bahamas in legal matters prior to his appointment as chairman on August 1, 2012. Upon his appointment as IRCA's chairman, representation of CBL by his law firm was assigned to other attorneys in the firm, said IRCA. The statement said Dorset no longer has any such dealings with Cable Bahamas Limited or any other licensee of IRCA, and those facts were disclosed to IRCA by Dorset upon his appointment as chairman. IRCA said that upon Dorset's disclosure of these matters, the board accepted that appropriate and satisfactory measures had been put in place to deal with any claims of conflict of interest. At its August 2012 meeting, the board also decided to publish these facts on its website in its quarterly report of board activities, which becomes due in October. And in other news, officials at the Bahamas Crisis Center have been pushing for a number of new issues to be addressed in recent years. With a new government in place, Crisis Center Director Dr. Sandra Dean Patterson says she plans to reintroduce the idea of a rape court among other domestic violence issues. Jasmine Bonamy reports.
Although the Crisis Center has existed for the past 30 years under successive governments, Dr. Dean Patterson says there are still a number of issues that still need to be addressed. Chief among them, establishing a separate court for rapes and a new home for the Crisis Center.
Dr. Dean Patterson has repeatedly asked the government to establish a sexual offenses court. However, the call for the rape court was renewed after the Ingram administration reintroduced the gun court last year. The noted psychologist has gone on record saying she believes the conviction rate for sex offenders in the Bahamas is far less than 5%. She said there are a myriad of reasons, but the main one is the court system. Dr. Patterson says once an offense is reported, there is a very long process in getting to trial. It's an issue she plans to once again raise with the Christie administration.
We have opened up the dialogue, and it's an ongoing process. You know, we're still continuing the battle for a separate court, because I think for victims of sexual violence, it's a nightmare, you know? I mean, there's so many victims who are waiting 5-6 years for justice. And so that's obviously something that will be discussed. But the main thing is to look at how we could do things differently. Over the years, we've been fighting against violence. We've been opening the door, you know, breaking the silence. Now we want to say, what is it that we can put in there that can make a difference?
There are sexual offenses courts in many American states, South Africa, and Australia. Dr. Patterson hopes to get the government to adopt similar models. NB12 found no information of specialized sex offense courts in the Caribbean. But Patterson also hopes the new administration will help the Crisis Center find a new home, as they've already outgrown the Princess Margaret Hospital after their former location was demolished.
We're looking in particular to dialogue to get a home, you know. We're hoping to get we're very grateful to Princess Margaret for housing us, but it really isn't adequate in terms of space and in terms of the numbers. You know, when we first started, we started in one room and in a building, and, you know, maybe we saw 200 persons. Now we're seeing over 1,000, and so young people, women, and now men are coming forward and calling us and wanting to get a healthier, better family life. And so we need a bigger space.
So far, Dr. Dean Patterson says they have had a good relationship with the Christie administration, and 6 ministers, including Prime Minister Perry Christie, will speak at the center's Peace at Home, Peace in Our Community conference next week. Patterson says organizers hope the 3-day conference will help stakeholders set up protocols for domestic violence.
Violence is something that has almost become as Bahamian now as Kong salad. You know, I mean, we pick up the newspapers, we hear the TVs, and all we hear is violence going on. We're concerned now about our schools. We're talking about having to put police in our schools. And so obviously violence is something that's on the tongue and mind of a lot of people. And what we want to say is, let's look at things differently.
Patterson says she hopes to meet with government officials in a matter of weeks. Reporting for NB12, I'm Jasmine Bonamy.